to operate in New York City, to operate in Florida, the Virgin Islands, the ability to travel, and in some cases his own credibility. There was a period there where Epstein was saying that he was closely involved with Wexner's operation, several of his Victoria's Secret, that he was involved in that process as well. So in a very real way, Les Wexner gave Epstein credibility and gave him the ability to commit some of the crimes that he did. One of the witnesses, one of the victims, the survivors, has already indicated that she was assaulted at this facility, at the mansion here, Wexner's home here, that she was refused permission to leave that house until security had cleared that she was kept there for several hours. So in an investigation, you usually follow the documents and you follow the money. And much of that evidence and all of that money leads us to this location. So far, and I'm just speaking generally, the more this deposition goes on, the less Wexner knows about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. There was a deep trust between these two men.
What is up, everybody? How we doing?
There was a deep friendship there. Not only in a business sense, but Les Wexner gave Epstein the ability to handle his children's and his family's money. So at least that part of it makes it hard to believe Les Wexner's testimony thus far. It may be a question as to whether Les Wexner was involved in the crimes directly, but there is no question in my mind, given the evidence so far,
what's up, Kitty,
that Les Wexner knew about this and failed to stop it and gave Epstein license and the ability to commit these crimes. And I'll yield. Okay.
We've done something that the Department of Justice has failed to do. We have actually sat down and listened, not once, not twice, but on multiple occasions, to the survivors. As you saw last week, A.G. Bondi wouldn't even turn and look at the survivors, let alone allow her DOJ to do their job, which is to investigate. So here we are as the legislative branch doing our jobs and trying to do oversight. Let me tell you, the survivors have said over and over and over, follow the money. That was the one thing that they told us, as well as their attorneys, follow the money. Well, we're following the money, but I'm going to be perfectly honest with you and tell you that we are running into dead ends at this moment. On yesterday, I was asked about this particular deposition and what I anticipated I would hear. As a trained attorney and litigator, once they told me he wasn't taking the fifth, I thought that the record would be full of I don't remembers. I will tell you that once this record comes out, you will see that you most likely will be left with more questions than answers. It is almost inconceivable to be missing the amounts of money that are missing, and somehow Mr. Wexner have no idea. The other thing that I want you to pay attention to, because again, as a trained litigator, think about some of the themes that we keep hearing. We know that there were supposedly these fraudulent modeling agencies that were set up all over the country, and girls would go in thinking that they were going to get their chance at modeling. Victoria's Secret. We know Victoria's Secret was known specifically for their fashion shows. We know that there are reports of girls that went in thinking that they were potentially going in to model. These are not coincidences. There's two things that have been clear, is that there were always young girls seemingly looking for an opportunity to model, and there were always rich and powerful people on the other side, dangling a carrot, saying, I will give you the life that you're seeking. Yet ultimately, the stories are the same. They're stories of abuse. They're stories of trafficking. at the highest level. And I will tell you one thing that was remembered for sure was when asked about Donald Trump and Epstein and whether or not they had been in the same room and what that looked like. He didn't quite remember, but he imagined that yes, that possibly happened, because he did remember that Donald Trump also would like to show up to the Victoria's Secret runway shows. Now, that was a little odd to him, he said, because Donald Trump was not engaged in fashion whatsoever. But he does recall that. He also said something that I feel like we've heard over and over and over, which is that Epstein liked to drop people's names. So he'd imagine that that may have been one of the names that he dropped. Listen, I want the American people, but more specifically, I want the survivors and anyone who is struggling right now to know that we see you, we feel you, and we are fighting for you. We will not stop. If Mr. Wexner is honest about his intentions in helping us, then we're asking him, if he doesn't remember, then go ahead and turn over all of your financial records, because we need to follow the money, because that is exactly what the survivors told us to do. And we know that the Department of Justice is either inadequate or just not interested in doing justice as it relates to this particular scenario.
This stuff is crazy.
We in America deserve better. We are looking around the country and we're seeing CEOs that are having to leave their own companies.
Insane.
We're seeing people that are having to leave their board positions. We're seeing princes being dethroned. We're seeing all kinds of stuff everywhere except for right here at the highest levels of federal government. Whether we're talking about Donald Trump himself or whether we're talking about Secretary Lutnick, and the list goes on. We deserve better in this country, and we will get it.
Good morning. Over the course of the last year, the American public has been witnessing what I can only call the most egregious cover-up in American history.
What's up, everybody? Double tap that screen, subscribe.
To try to end this cover-up once and for all. We have met with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the rich and powerful people that helped to perpetuate these crimes. And we have heard over and over from these victims the name of Les Wexner and the importance of following the money. Because the story of Jeffrey Epstein is one that can almost, almost is the plot of a movie that is turned into a nightmare. And the real reason Jeffrey Epstein was able to get away with raping and abusing children, young women, boys, young men for so many years was because of the vast amounts of money that he was able to acquire, and that largely came from Les Wexner here in Ohio. So we're here to ask Les Wexner the critical questions, and it's been very interesting to see the types of responses that he's giving and his demeanor throughout the interview. He claims to want to provide information and to be helpful in the investigation, but then quickly follows up by saying that he does not recall details around a relationship with somebody that he had for decades. Les Wexner handed his power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein. He allowed Jeffrey Epstein to live in his homes, to have hundreds of millions of his dollars, to use his yachts and his planes. This was obviously a very, very close relationship, and so far what we have seen is a denial of that relationship. Another important theme that has come up today is that Les Wexner is actually tied to other sex trafficking and child abuse scandals here in Ohio, around the country. There are reports of payments that were made to a gynecologist at Ohio State University, and that money went through Jeffrey Epstein but came from Les Wexner. And he has been asked about this with no real response, no recollection. And again, as my colleagues have said, I don't think it is feasible or understandable or conceivable that any individual would not have an understanding of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money and can't answer to those questions. So it is clear that this cover-up is vast. It goes as high as the White House and the Department of Justice that still has not released The majority of the Epstein files still has illegally redacted information, still has not begun any indictments or prosecutions for the very credible allegations that are in the files that we already have seen, all the way to people at universities, in companies, and vast networks of elite individuals across this country. And what I can tell you very clearly is that oversight Democrats on this committee will not back down until we get every detail, until every person who enabled and perpetrated these crimes is held accountable. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Dave Menn, freshman member of Congress out of Orange County, California. And before getting into office, I was a law professor. I'm a graduate of Harvard Law School, and earlier in my career, I was an SEC enforcement attorney. So I've done quite a few of these types of depositions and witness interviews. And while I don't want to comment on an ongoing deposition, we're going to go back in there and ask more questions. I can basically say that he has basically alleged that he saw no evil, heard no evil, despite being in the room with Jeffrey Epstein over and over and over. And it's really just not credible. I realize he's an elderly gentleman, memories fade, but the reputation of Jeffrey Epstein is very clear. Everyone around Jeffrey Epstein knew exactly what he's up to. And to spend that much time, to give that much trust to Jeffrey Epstein, and then to say, I don't remember seeing any young girls, I didn't hear anything about Jeffrey Epstein, it really is just not plausible. And so we're going to keep digging, but I want to just echo the comments earlier. This is a bit frustrating because we're not getting real answers to the questions that the American people deserve answers to. I also just want to give kudos to my colleagues behind me right here. Robert Garcia and the Democrats on the Oversight Committee have led the effort to try to expose this cover-up. What we've seen is foot dragging. We've seen, if you remember back to Pam Bondi saying that this was all a hoax and a cover-up, that there were no Epstein files. Due to the efforts of Ranking Member Garcia, we have been able to pierce that myth. We're getting more answers, but we've got a lot of work to do. And we'll just add, it is very frustrating the fact that there are no Republicans here today. I wish there were Republicans, because sex trafficking should not be a D versus R issue. It should be a bipartisan issue. Everybody should be invested in finding the truth right now. And the fact that we've had so little cooperation from the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, that the DOJ has actively tried to obstruct this investigation, that is shameful, and it will go down as a permanent mark on the records of people like Pam Bondi and Donald Trump. Now, I'll just close with this. When I got off the plane, I saw Wexner's name all over the place. His name is on buildings, it's on medical centers, and you immediately realize when you come to Columbus what a powerful individual this is. But I just want to say that no matter how rich or powerful you are, America stands for the principle that there's one rule of law that applies to anybody and everybody equally. And so whether Wexner is rich and powerful, whether Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump or Howard Lutnick are rich and powerful, should not matter. We're going to get the answers. People will be brought to justice. We will not rest until that happens. Thanks.
Thank you. And before I answer a couple questions, let me add two things that are really important. One is, it's been clear to us, at least the way Mr. Wexner has presented this, that he, according to him, has not been was questioned by the FBI or the DOJ about Mr. Epstein. How outrageous is that? He's someone that's been named by survivors, someone that's in the files more than most people, someone that's clearly the financial benefactor to Jeffrey Epstein and has not been contacted or interviewed by the FBI or the DOJ. What the hell is going on? That is shameful. We should be ashamed as a government. The survivors deserve justice. And so that's something that we are going to continue to press today, and certainly press with Pam Bondi and the DOJ. And the second thing, something that I think is critical to all of us, I think this community should also be asking questions. This community deserves to know why the most powerful man and one of the richest men, if not the richest man in Ohio, gave so much of his wealth to the largest modern sex trafficking ring in American history. Why his money was used to traffic, abuse, and rape women and children. And so I think this community has questions of Mr. Wexner. Ohio State should have questions of Mr. Wexner. And Mr. Wexner's involvement and our questions, today's not the end of our questions for Mr. Wexner, it's the beginning of our questions for Mr. Wexner and anyone in this community across Ohio or the country that has done business dealings or that knows why he provided so much money for Jeffrey Epstein to then go on and commit all these horrible crimes. We can answer a couple questions.
How often is he taking? Thank you, Congressman Garcia. Thank you guys for doing this. A couple questions. First off, you mentioned, and in Les Wexner's opening statement, he said that he did not have any knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Do you believe he's lying, given what you know about him and the evidence he poured over that?
This stuff is crazy.
In a 2019 affidavit, Maria Farmer said that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had sexually abused her at the Wexner estate, and that the Wexner security guards wouldn't let her leave. You guys touched on that incident at all during the deposition. And third, what comes next in your investigation?
So let me start by saying that I do not believe when Mr. Wexner says that he did not have a personal relationship or a friendly relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I think that is bogus, personally. I think I can also say that we believe the survivors. And I think the Farmer testimony is critical. And what happened to not just Maria, but to Annie and the Farmer women was horrific. And this idea that she gave such a description of what happened to her, and somehow we should just dismiss that as a lie or untrue, I think is outrageous. There's no question in my mind that there was a relationship and that Mr. Wexner is very aware and likely aware of what was going on.
Representative Garcia. Mr. Wexner about
There have been questions that have been asked about the Farmer incident, and that will continue in the afternoon. Yes.
Tom Bosco with the ABC affiliate here in Columbus. Can you give us a little more of the flavor of the questioning? Is he combative with the questions? Is there a lot of conferring with attorneys before he answers? And you said he has not pleaded the Fifth or taken the Fifth Amendment?
He's not pleaded the Fifth. I think that he's answering some questions. He's saying that he doesn't remember, and other questions.
See no evil, hear no evil.
Exactly. He's claiming that there's basically was no friendship with Jeffrey Epstein or no real strong relationship, which we know by reporting that's just not true. It's pretty ridiculous. Do you want to add to that?
As it relates to the lawyers specifically, there's a lot of objections.
A lot of objections. Any other questions? Yes.
Les Wexner, he admitted to visiting Epstein Island. And what do you know? What has he shared about his activities while on the island and any involvement he might
Go ahead,
or hear at his mansion also?
Yeah, I asked that question today. He claimed that he was on the island for 1 hour and that he walked around with his family. And I asked him if any other individuals were there, and he said no. And that was a kind of a repetitive thing that he said as well when we asked about if he had been to another property. He said, I was there for 1 hour, and I go to many places for just 1 hour.
And did he speak about any involvement with survivors, even here at his mansion in Albany?
No.
He denied everything.
Not everything. And quite frankly, it would have been nice to have seen more remorse. Yes.
Mr. Wexner is 88 years old. He's also been missing Wexner Medical Center board meetings where he's chair. Can you describe his demeanor, how he is? He's an elderly gentleman, of course, but
Do you want to add that? Pretty sure.
Well, I think he's lucid. I think he's certainly capable of answering these questions. There's no deterioration in his mental faculties, so he's a competent witness. He's just not telling the truth.
Will this
why here in Ohio versus here in D.C.?
Deposition locations are decided by the majority party, and that was decided to have it here.
Will this deposition even matter if Pam Bondi and the DOJ are not taking this as a main focus?
Look, I think that we have. My first answer is yes. This deposition absolutely does matter, and it's important to get. Remember, Mr. Wexner is under oath to tell the truth. So every single answer that he gives is a broader part of our investigation. This is just the beginning of our work with and trying to get the truth on Mr. Wexner, and so that it absolutely matters. Any final questions?
Let me know your guys' thoughts on any of this stuff. Is crazy.
Well, that's up to the.
Don't be shy in the chat.
We're putting the pressure on. Yes. Anybody want to answer that? What's that? Credibility issue. Look, I think at the end of the day, we need to ask the questions and get Mr. Wexner on the record. That's the most important part right now. Is we have questions that are going to continue throughout the afternoon and get him on the record. We have time for a couple more questions. We got to wrap up.
If you feel you're not getting the answer you need today, what should we expect next from you guys?
Jasmine.
Well, I'm gonna let you
you do that one. I was going to do the other one.
Yeah, I think what's next is we may have additional questions. We have more people to speak to, folks that are involved with Mr. Wexner and that have done business with him, including the doctor that we just discussed earlier that got transferred a significant amount of money. They can expect questions from us.
Will you ask for the finance records while the president?
Absolutely, we're asking for those. Jasmine, do you want to answer the other part of the question?
All right.
Let me let Jasmine go ahead. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Representative Garcia, when you said there are no Republicans here, you didn't just mean at this press conference. There are no Republicans
There are no Republican members of Congress.
at this deposition.
Yes,
No.
right. There are Republican staff members. No Republican members of Congress chose to come. We'll take one final question.
Wexner was named as a possible co-conspirator in a lot of the documents. Anything you've seen today makes you think he might not be or could be?
There's nothing I've heard that no. I think that is a very open question, and I think that's a part of the investigation is going to continue. Thanks, everybody.
Update us again once it's done. Deposition is over.
This is for now. We got to go back. Thank you.
We were just hearing from Democratic lawmakers talking about the ongoing testimony of Les Wexner, talking about the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But I did want to turn your attention to this because we did just get an alert from the White House indicating that the press briefing is set to get underway any moment now. So I did want to share this with you as we are expecting Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt to walk through that blue door on the left and talk. Now, there will be a number of issues most likely discussed as there are ongoing tensions between the United States and Iran as negotiations between the U.S. and Iran advanced yesterday toward what Tehran described as the beginning of a potential framework. However, there are sharp divisions in terms of exactly how the United States should proceed. This, as the Iranian foreign minister said, the two sides reached a, quote, general agreement on a number of guiding principles and agreed to begin drafting text for a possible agreement with plans to exchange drafts and schedule a third round of talks. In a statement, he said, quote, good progress was made compared to the previous meeting, adding that while the drafting would slow the process, at least the path has started. D.C., though, publicly insisting that any agreement must result in the dismantling of Iran's nuclear program, including its enrichment capacity, along with limits on Tehran's ballistic missile program and an end to its support for allied militant groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Those demands go well beyond temporary enrichment pauses or technical adjustments. Now, Iran's supreme leader appeared to push back directly against that premise, signaling a firm ceiling on Iran's concessions, writing in a social media post, quote, the Americans say, let's negotiate over your nuclear energy, and the results of the negotiation is supposed to be that you do not have this energy. If that's the case, there is no room for negotiation. His remarks suggest that while Iranian negotiators may be discussing limits or interim measures, Iran is unlikely to accept an agreement that eliminates its nuclear program outright, setting up a direct collision with the Trump administration's insistence on dismantlement. According to a U.S. official, progress was made, but there are still a lot of details to discuss. The Iranians said they would come back in the next 2 weeks with detailed proposals to address some of the open gaps in our positions, end quote. President Trump, meanwhile, has remarked that he would be watching these talks closely. Iranian officials have pointed to U.S. military strikes on their nuclear facilities in June of 2025 as part of a broader backdrop complicating diplomacy, arguing such actions demonstrate Washington's willingness to use force even as negotiations unfold. So we are awaiting White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. You can see that blue door opening as that gentleman
Somebody in the comments is like,
That's
start using
where
Linux.
We are expecting her to open up and then give prepared remarks before opening up the field to question and answers with the media. This was slated to get underway at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so running just about 20 minutes behind schedule. And as we do await that, I did want to share this with you. This is from the White House, saying that President Trump signed into law the largest tax cuts in American history. This includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security, all of which will save Americans money in their tax returns this year. Affordability continuing to be a major tentpole as we look towards the midterms, and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance continue to tout the growing economy and the more affordable products. They often cite eggs and gas in that area. So we are awaiting White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt to walk out through those doors, perhaps talking about those tax refunds. And in fact, Caroline Leavitt taking to social media, saying that Trump touts potential 10% tax refunds from big, beautiful bills. So likely one of the topics that she will discuss. Also, as we look ahead to next week's State of the Union, the White House sharing this: 1 week, the agenda, the results, President Donald J. Trump's State of the Union address. And very likely part of the State of the Union continues to be the ongoing issue of affordability. President Trump making that really part of the foundation of his platform as he discusses how his administration continues to make life more affordable for the American people. So we do see now that the photographers there are trained on the door. We see the cameras are ready, perhaps an indication that Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is getting ready to walk out through those doors. She'll first share a prepared statement and then open up the floor to questions. And as we await this, we also are in the middle of another partial government shutdown. This is from Fox News Politics, saying Democrats delay tactic. Republicans accuse Democrats of weaponizing the DHS shutdown to block voter ID legislation. The Save America Act has 50 GOP backers, but faces an uncertain timeline as funding crisis dominates the Senate agenda. So another issue very likely to be posed to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is the ongoing partial government shutdown. The Democrats refusing to pass another funding bill because of issues happening to be part of the Department of Homeland Security. So that is something that President Trump has really asked both sides to work towards, but Democrats digging in their heels, saying that that is the red line in the sand for them. So we are still waiting for this to get underway. We did see the camera move just a little bit, sometimes an indication that this is imminent. And the White House also sending out an alert to us. That alert stating that the briefing would get underway at 1:10 p.m. Eastern Time. We're now right at 1:23, so running just a little bit behind schedule. However, she does continue to share these tweets, including this one saying and citing CNBC, saying that mortgage rates sink to the lowest level in a month, sparking more refinance demand. And that's been another issue that President Trump has spoken about, talking about the ability for folks to purchase a home. And he says that he's really working towards making that more affordable, making the American dream once again more affordable. So we did want to share that with you, as perhaps that is something that will be discussed. So this is something from someone, and we do see maybe a little bit of movement. I just wanted to head back here. We did see in the new media seats, and so these are seats off to the side. We did see some folks getting seated in that. These are non-traditional media outlets that now are able to ask the very first question for these press briefings. We did see someone escorted in, and they sat at the seat. Typically, that indicates the very last step before we see Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt walk out. So this is a new facet towards these press briefings. The Trump administration touting that they wanted to make these press briefings more accessible to non-traditional media outlets. And because of that, they have allowed one non-traditional media outlet per press briefing to sit down, and they would be the very first to ask the question to Caroline Leavitt once she opens up the floor.
So they're basically saying that for this entire time, you had to be a major news network to be the one to ask the questions. And now they're letting just one person in from a non-traditional media news outlet. That's kind of weird, and it also tells you that it doesn't matter what side things are on, both sides are trying to control narratives for their own gain. Especially, like, that's just, if you don't see why they would do something like that traditionally over time, then I guess you're just not seeing it.
To question. So we did see that individual get seated on the side of this room. That typically indicates that she is ready to walk out in just a moment. But as we await, I did want to go back to that social media post right here saying, as DHS negotiations between White House and Democrats are ongoing.
What's up,
Jeffrey
Amy?
says he has not seen any high-level effort coming from the president or from the House Republican leaders to end the partial shutdown, saying, quote,
I want to respond to Amy's comment. So, like, I don't know. It's such an interesting statement, going to war, because I would hear a lot of statements like that when I was just a civilian, and then when I went to the Army, I would hear things like that. And then now that I'm a veteran and I'm a civilian again, I'm kind of like, I hear this stuff all the time, but, you know, I don't know if it ever kind of gets to that point where people think this is actually going to be that catastrophic, you know? Yeah, well, as far as weapons goes, definitely control a lot of weapons over here. Some of the best technologies and things like that. And that's just the things we know about. Yeah. Oil's an interesting topic because a lot of the oil that gets refined into like petroleum products and things like that is from overseas. All of the oil refineries, for the most part, that we have in the United States are just like all being like held in reserves for things like that. But how's your day going today, Amy? Hopefully you're having a good day. Wanted to respond to that real quick. I thought it was interesting.
We have no idea where they're at in the midst, rather, of a crisis of their own making. And in fact, while we were in other live coverage, we did see Representative Jeffries speak to the media. So perhaps that was a quote directly from that briefing that will play out just a little bit later on, as we do await White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
Nuclear stuff is crazy.
The Communications Department is sending us an alert indicating that she will be holding that briefing. It does look like this is running maybe just about 20 minutes behind schedule right here.
Oh, nice. Hopefully you're having a good work day.
At 1 p.m. Eastern time as well. This is, meanwhile, a social media post from Politico saying that J.D. Vance is increasingly of the minds of foreign officials as a likely 2028 contender. But the VP's comments and actions have some diplomats questioning his ability to navigate global crises. And that is according to a Politico reporter. In fact, he was on Fox News talking about looking ahead to 2028 and possibly running for the presidency. And what's interesting is during one of these cabinet meetings, President Trump was asked who he would like to see run as the next president of the United States. And he didn't point out specific names, but he said a lot of the people on his cabinet.
But that's also something that's not new for being one of like the newer countries out there and being such like a leader in so many categories, especially like in military presence and things like that. There's always everywhere I went overseas, people, like, it's just kind of like the popular thing that people do is like everybody loves to talk about like how bad America is. Like, that's like even more prevalent. Like, you think people here debate politics and stuff about Americans? Like, go to the United Kingdom. Like, that stuff's crazy. People just talk about, I swear to God, like, you'll hear people mention Trump, like, just walking down the street in another country, like, all day long. And you're just like, oh my God, I don't even know if we care this much. Yeah. Oh, you're getting off early? That's sick. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one of those things that, like, I didn't understand it until I was, like, actually, you know, outside the country and notice that's like kind of how people are. So like historically over time, it's like if we were there to like help somebody or something, right? Or if they were getting funds for something, then they would, put on the nice face and be like, "Oh, thank you so much," shake your hand. But then as soon as you're gone, it's be like, "Yeah, those people are so crappy." It's like as long as what you're getting out of the deal is beneficial to you, then it's like you put the nice face on. But yeah, I feel like it's a lot of it stem from like jealousy and yeah, that's why it's crazy. It's like you don't think about stuff like that until you're like in a different situation, right? Where you're like, man, I wish more people would just get outside of the country just to, live somewhere else for 6 months or a year. Because one of the things is like it'll change your perspective on things here. I know that everybody likes to talk about how bad things here all the time, but I've been to some places where people don't have the kind of luxuries to worry about the kind of, you know, first world problems that we have here. So it is interesting when you get like other people's perspectives from it when you're outside of the country and stuff. But yeah, it's like I always used to hear that like, oh, the Americans are so wild and they act crazy. And then when I was in the Netherlands, like the Americans are like the quiet ones, and then like all the Germans and English and Scottish and the Irish are like very rowdy and loud, and the Americans are just kind of like keeping to themselves like quietly. But the stereotype out there is that we're like the obnoxious loud ones, and I always think that's funny too. But yeah, your perspective will change on it the more you kind of like spend time somewhere else and see how like other people are judging it. You listen to it, try to see it through their eyes,
He could see running and he would support Caroline Leavitt right
That's
now.
also true. Yeah.
Thank you for your patience
About
as
free
always.
speech.
Let's begin with some scheduling announcements for the remainder of President Trump's very busy week. Today at 3 p.m., President Trump will host a Black History Month reception in the East Room of the White House. I know many of you will attend, and we will see you up there. Tomorrow, President Trump will host a Board of Peace meeting at the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, where he will announce that member states have pledged more than $5 billion towards the Gaza humanitarian and reconstruction efforts, and have also committed thousands of personnel to the International Stabilization Force and local police to maintain security and peace for Gazans. Tomorrow afternoon, the president will travel to the great state of Georgia, where he will visit 2 local businesses and give a speech on his efforts to make life affordable for working people. On Friday, President Trump will host a working breakfast with governors in the East Room here at the White House. And on Saturday night, President Trump and the First Lady will host the annual Governor's Dinner. Next, I'd like to provide an update on the economy. We're seeing promising signs every day that 2026 is going to be a record successful year for the American people, just as President Trump promised them. The January jobs report shattered expectations, highlighting how the president's pro-growth economic agenda is fueling American prosperity. The economy added 172,000 new private sector jobs to kick off the year. That's more than 2.5 times economists' predictions. The labor force participation rate went up while the unemployment rate fell. The prime age labor force participation rate is now at its highest since 2001. Most importantly, 100% of all job creation
I did
under
shave Lee.
President Trump continues to be
You
in the
noticed.
private sector. This is truly remarkable. That's 615,000 private sector jobs that have been added in President Trump's second term thus far. These are real working people. These are real American families who will be living out their American dream. Meanwhile, federal government employment has shrunk to its lowest level since 1966, saving taxpayers $29 billion annually. And all of the net job growth under President Trump has gone to native-born Americans, ending the disgraceful pattern under Joe Biden of job gains going to non-citizens and illegal aliens. Additionally, on inflation, the new CPI report is even more proof of the progress made by President Trump. Despite all of the doom casting from the so-called experts,
Okay, Amy, have a good.
managed to
Oh, I'll be
utilize
live
powerful tariffs to
throughout the day,
secure
on and off.
trillions of dollars in investments
I'm sure you'll
into
catch me
our
at some point.
country and rebalance our
But
trade
yeah, have a
while
good
simultaneously
last part of your
cooling
work shift.
inflation. Year-over-year inflation fell to 2.4% in January, beating expectations again and marking the lowest level since May. Core inflation, the best measure of inflation, dropped to its lowest level in nearly 5 years. Meanwhile, real average hourly earnings for all private sector workers rose in the month of January, which means more money is going back directly into people's pockets. After only 1 year of President Trump back in office, real earnings for all private sector workers have outpaced inflation by nearly $1,400, earning back roughly half of the $2,900 they lost under Joe Biden when 40-year high inflation was stealing Americans' purchasing power. President Trump's policies are and will continue to allow Americans' incomes to go further for bills, retirement, and achieving the American dream. A key part of the American dream is buying a home. And that is finally becoming more affordable under this president. This past week, it was announced the annual mortgage cost for a new home has fallen by $4,000 so far under President Trump, after rising by roughly $15,000 under Joe Biden. As a result, mortgage affordability has reached a 4-year best following recent bold action by the president to make home ownership more attainable for American families, not large Wall Street corporate institutional investors. At the same time, national median rents have fallen to a 4-year low and have declined for 6 consecutive months. The annual rental cost for a new rental unit has fallen nearly $100 so far under President Trump, after rising
You're having a
more
burger
than
for dinner? That's awesome.
under Joe Biden.
Who's
Many
DFT?
are crediting that to the president's deportation efforts to remove illegal aliens from our communities and therefore from housing that should be used for American citizens. At the grocery store, the price of eggs, dairy, cheese, fresh fruit, apples, oranges, potatoes, tomatoes, and butter have fallen since President Trump took office, and he is continuing to fight for even lower prices at the grocery store. for the
DFT is
American
Donald
consumer.
J. Trump?
At the gas pump, fuel prices are down by almost 10%.
I have
over the
never
past
met him,
year.
so I have
The
no
average
idea.
national price for a gallon of regular gas is now less than $3 and is approaching $2.70 in some states, and much lower than that in many states across the country as well. We've seen in several states gas is under $2 a gallon. And at the pharmacy, prescription drug prices are down over the past year, with even more price relief ahead for American patients, thanks to President Trump's most favored nation drug pricing deals and the great health care plan, which he is calling on Congress to pass as soon as possible. What President Trump wants Americans to understand is that this is only the start and the best is yet to come. The historic success that we have seen since he took office is just the beginning of enormous growth and opportunity that we are about to witness. And I know the president looks forward to hitting the road and being with the great people of Georgia tomorrow to talk about just this. So with that, today, I know there's a lot of news. I will open it up to take your questions, and we're going to start, as always, with our new media seat, the great Michael Graham from Inside
Oh, nice.
Sources. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Thank you for having us.
Burger with cheese? A
Thanks to
cheeseburger.
200 newspaper partners around the country. So you mentioned gas. We didn't mention natural gas. And back where you live, your friends and family are paying among the highest prices for natural gas to heat their home and for electricity generation, the #1 source of power across New England. The cheap gas is in Pennsylvania. The 2 highest places to buy gas in the country, New York City and Boston. The problem is the blue states will not allow the gas to travel to produce electricity or to reach customers. When President Trump first came back in office, there was some talk him and Governor Hochul in New York possibly reaching a deal. When will consumers in the Northeast feel relief from President Trump's energy policies, and what can he do about state objections to expansion of infrastructure? Then I have a quick follow-up.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the president has promised all Americans across the country, and in particular in the Northeast, where we do face much higher costs of electricity and of energy, unfortunately,
Ooh, sounds
because
delicious.
of Democrat policies in the area. From the federal government's perspective, the president and the National Energy Dominance Council, Secretaries Wright and Burgum, are doing all we can when it comes to federal permitting. The drill, baby, drill agenda is obviously underway. The president has made a huge push for more fossil fuels in this country. You look at what he did last week with respect to coal. Coal truly keeps the lights on in this country. We learned that in the recent winter storms. However, there's only so much that can be done at the federal level. That's why the president has called on blue state governors to participate in this energy dominance agenda, including governors in New England and the Northeast, by contacting Governor Hochul directly to get this Constitution pipeline underway. This is not only going to bring down the cost of energy in the Northeast, it's also going to support job growth and energy affordability and more opportunity for workers.
I don't really watch the news
and
either.
I just have a quick statistic here on energy that I found fascinating, and it's obviously true because I'm saying it up here. Red states with Republican legislatures currently enjoy lower average retail electricity prices than blue states with Democrat legislatures. And that's exactly why the president is calling on all blue state governors across New England and the Northeast to get on board. Let's bring prices down for all Americans, whether they live in a red or a blue state.
So right down the street from your alma mater, San Antonio College, talk about building an ICE facility that's causing a lot of political agita in New Hampshire, and for the Republican governor, Kelly Ayotte. Seems to be some miscommunications argued on both sides. Even Republican supporters of Trump who live in the town say, we're not sure we want this. What's your message to the folks in New Hampshire about this proposed ICE facility?
The message is that illegal immigration, while the border is secure, is still a problem across our entire homeland. And the previous administration allowed nearly 20 million illegal aliens from countries all over the world into our country. And the president and Secretary Noem have done a phenomenal job at deporting. Nearly 3 million illegals have left the country either through deportation or self-deportation over the past year. But obviously, there are a lot more illegal alien criminals left in our homeland. That includes in New England. There are many within our communities in New Hampshire.
Oh, that's
Maine,
hilarious.
Definitely in Massachusetts and in the Boston suburbs that need to be arrested, detained, and deported back to their home countries. And so the
It's
president
also an
and
interesting
Secretary
middle
Noem
name.
and I know ICE are engaged with local governors across the whole country, including in New Hampshire, to open more detention facilities. This is an unfortunate consequence of the previous administration's border invasion that the president has thankfully put a stop to. But of course, we still need to grapple with the illegal alien criminals who are here, and that requires more detention space. Thank you, Michael.
John.
Garrett.
On Iran, I'm not asking you for like military secrets here, but can you share?
Know I would be so unwise.
Unless you want to give them. Can you share a little bit about the president's thinking on whether or not to strike Iran, who he's talking to, what information he's consuming, and why a strike might be necessary on a nuclear program he says was obliterated by the last U.S. strike?
Well,
Oh,
there's
nice.
many reasons and arguments that one could make for a strike against Iran. The president had a very successful operation as commander-in-chief with Operation Midnight Hammer, as you know, as you just said, totally obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities. The president has always been very clear, though, with respect to Iran or any country around the world, diplomacy is always his first option, and Iran would be very wise to make a deal with President Trump and with this administration. He's talking to many people, of course, his national security team, first and foremost, and you know who the members of that team are. And this is something, obviously, the president takes seriously. He's always thinking about what's in the best interests of the United States of America, of our military, of the American people, and that's how he makes decisions with respect to military action of any kind.
And on the flip side of that, he's got the State of the Union speech next week. If he is going to take military action, does the administration believe it's important to sort of convince the American people, sell the American people? Will we hear something about that in the State of the Union to make the case for why something like that might be necessary to risk American lives?
Look, again, I'm not going to engage in a hypothetical. Good try, Garrett, but you can't catch me there. I will say, with respect to the State of the Union, you'll be hearing more about what is to come from the president's speech very soon at the appropriate time. It is going to be a very good and powerful speech, so everyone should tune in. Ed.
Caroline, thank you. I got two questions for
Sure.
you. About Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the administration's decided to appeal a judge's ruling that in essence was trying to put the slavery displays back, arguing that the federal government believed it had the power to dissemble and disassemble historical truths when it has some domain over historical facts. The judge said it does not. The administration said that you were planning to put up updated interpretive materials and provide a fuller account of the history of slavery at Independence Hall. What more was the administration, or is the administration, planning to add?
I'm not familiar with this specific instance, Ed, to be honest with you, but I will check in with the appropriate people who are overseeing this, and we'll get you a more firm answer.
One other question then. Yesterday in his statement about Jesse Jackson, the president said, despite the fact that I'm falsely and consistently called a racist by the scoundrels and lunatics on the radical left, Democrats all, it was always my pleasure to help Jesse along the way. Where or when does the president believe he's been falsely called racist?
You're kidding, right? I will pull you plethora of examples. I'm going to get my team in that room to start going through the internet of radical Democrats throughout the years, Ed, who have accused this president falsely of being a racist. And I'm sure there's many people in this room and on network television across the country who have accused him of the same. In fact, I know that because I've seen it with my own eyes. And the president very much looks forward to having a event later this afternoon at 3 p.m. to celebrate Black History Month and to talk about how his policies are advancing opportunity and prosperity for all Americans through record tax cuts, through the Trump accounts that all Americans can access regardless of race. These are a great thing for the next generation of Americans. The president has also awarded hundreds of millions of dollars in additional funding to strengthen educational outcomes at historically Black colleges and universities across the country. Again, the president is protecting the hard-earned benefits of the 2.4 million Black veterans who honorably served in our nation's armed forces by reducing the backlog of veterans waiting for their VA benefits and for their home loans through the Department of Veterans Affairs. So there is a lot this president has done for all Americans regardless of race, and he has absolutely been falsely called and smeared as a racist, and I'm happy to provide you those receipts, and we gladly will right after this briefing. Jennifer, go ahead.
You mentioned the
this is Fox News.
For the Board of Peace. Will we be able to get a breakdown of which countries are providing each of those pledges?
Yes.
And which countries are providing troops?
Sure. We're happy to provide that breakdown, and I'm also happy to provide the list of countries that will be attending tomorrow. I know it's more than 20 countries. I know there's a lot of interest in that. I'll spare myself reading you the list of 20 countries from the podium, but we will provide it, and the president will be opening the meeting tomorrow with remarks, and will sort of formally be chairing the meeting at the beginning before he departs for Georgia tomorrow.
And then on the sewage spill.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the chat.
Can you give us an update on the federal government's response? And officials have told CBS that some of that aging infrastructure is a concern, that this particular pipe wasn't even of the most urgent concern. Do you know if the government is looking into which other pipes could be at risk of collapsing?
Well, the next step in this process is for any of the three local jurisdictions involved, whether that's the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of Maryland and Governor Moore, or the District of Columbia, to step forward and to ask the federal government for help and to ask for the Stafford Act to be implemented here so that the federal government can go and take control of this local infrastructure that has been abandoned and neglected by Governor Moore in Maryland for far too long. In fact, it's no secret that Maryland's water and infrastructure have been in dire need of repair. Their infrastructure has received a nearly failing grade in the 2025 report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers. This is the same grade they've received 5 years earlier. There has been no improvement under the leadership of Governor Moore. He's clearly shown he's incapable of fixing this problem, which is why President Trump and the federal government are standing by to step in. And for all of the environmentalists in the room and across the District of Columbia, let's all hope and pray that this governor does the right thing and ask President Trump to get involved, because it will be an ecological and environmental disaster if the federal government does not step in to help. But of course, we need the state and local jurisdictions to make that formal request. That's part of the legal process to move forward. Peter.
So you said that any of the three Democrats just need to ask. A few minutes ago, Maryland's Governor Wes Moore asked. He said, if the president wants me to ask nicely, our response is this: please, Mr. President, do your job.
To which I say, I'll ask the president, and we will provide you with the next steps. But in all seriousness, the federal government has been preparing plans. The White House has been in contact with FEMA, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with the Environmental Protection Agency. Again, we've been standing by. This is a problem we want to fix, not just for the federal government, but for everyone who lives in the District of Columbia, including all of you. So you're welcome.
To your point about that, there are a lot of events coming up for America 250. The president wants people from all over to come to the nation's capital. Is he worried?
Oh, yeah. Your original channel, yeah.
The Potomac River.
But now it's not, you said?
Smell like poop.
he is worried about that, which is why the federal government wants to fix it, and we hope that the local authorities will cooperate with us in doing so. Steve.
So what will the $5 billion be used for in Board of Peace, and will that be sort of a down payment for much more money?
You'll be hearing more about that tomorrow at the meeting. If you recall, at the first meeting when we were in Davos, Jared Kushner did provide a very detailed PowerPoint presentation for the vision of Gaza, the reconstruction and the humanitarian efforts, of course, providing local security on the ground. That will be part of the discussion tomorrow, is how can we maintain security? First, you must achieve security to get to prosperity, which is sort of the second part of this plan. So you'll be hearing more about that tomorrow, but I would just point out $5 billion worth of investment. We're talking about reconstructing Gaza. I remember when those words came from the president's lips in the East Room many months ago, and all of you in the press were bewildered at how the president could have such an ambitious goal of rebuilding Gaza, which is obviously a place that has been just turmoiled by violence and chaos for many, many years. But we are well underway in doing that, and it's a historic accomplishment for this president.
Secondly, is the president seeing enough progress in the Iran talks to let negotiations go a little further? I mean, where do things stand after yesterday's talks?
I think you heard from the administration and the State Department yesterday that there was a little bit of progress made, but we're still very far apart on some issues. I believe the Iranians are expected to come back to us with some more detail in the next couple of weeks, and so the president will continue to watch how this plays out. Sure.
Follow up on that. Thank you, Caroline. On these Iran talks, I mean, how much time is the president willing to give it before he is seriously maybe considering military action? Is he willing to give it that full 2 weeks? And has he given the Iranian officials a deadline on when he wants to see a deal?
It's a fair question, Rachel, but I'm not going to set deadlines on behalf of the president of the United States from up here.
And then just one more on the shutdown. We're now in this partial shutdown over DHS funding. Has the president personally spoken to the Democratic leaders in Congress? Can we expect to see them at the White House to try to make a deal on this?
Not to my knowledge, he hasn't had any direct conversation or correspondence with Democrat lawmakers recently. It doesn't mean he's not willing to. I'm just not aware of any conversations that have taken place. I do know the White House and the president's representatives have been in direct conversations with both Democrats and Republicans, but of course, Democrats are the reason that the Department of Homeland Security is currently shut down. They have chosen to act against the American people for political reasons, and now we have FEMA workers, the men and women of the United States Coast Guard, men and women of TSA who keep our airports moving, who will be working without paychecks for no good reason other than the Democrats wanting to pick a fight with Donald Trump. And the president thinks that is irresponsible and despicable. He wants the government to be open. We've been engaged in good faith negotiations with the Democrats. Last night, they sent over a counter proposal that frankly was very unserious, and we hope they get serious very soon because Americans are going to be impacted by this. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has talked about a forthcoming executive order on voter ID. Is there more details you can provide about for that? And can you talk about any steps that you're taking to overcome court challenges that you've kind of faced in this area before on voting?
Well, as the president said in that Truth Social post, he's discussing and exploring legal options for a potential executive order with respect to voter ID. But this is something he's made
didn't
very
get deleted?
clear he wants Congress to get done. The Save America Act is a common sense piece of legislation that has now passed the House of Representatives to ensure that voter ID is a requirement in the United States of America. This is a common sense policy that nearly 90% of the country agrees with. You need an ID to go and purchase alcohol. You need an ID to go to the library and check out a book. And so the president thinks you should have an ID to vote in our nation's elections. And I know the vast majority of Americans agree with him on that. And he wants Congress to move quickly to get it done.
Thank you so much. Can I ask Cuba something?
Sure.
On Cuba, you know, it's increasingly being described as a humanitarian crisis. What is a successful outcome for the U.S. that the U.S. wants to see in Cuba? Is there anything less than regime change that would be considered success?
I think, as Secretary Rubio has articulated and the president himself, we obviously want to see flourishing and prosperous democracies all over the world, especially in our own hemisphere. I'm not dictating any actions the United States may take to get there, but of course that's in the United States' best interest to have Cuba be a truly free and prosperous democracy. Unfortunately, right now, that is not the case. They are a regime that is falling, their country is collapsing, and that's why we believe it's in their best interest to make very dramatic changes very soon, and we'll see what they decide to do. Sure.
Thank you so much. Following up on Gaza.
Oh, that's crazy. You went past where you live.
Who would be in charge of managing this money? Would that be the president himself making the final decisions on how these funds are spent?
It will be the Board of Peace, which the president is, of course, the chairman of, but all of the member parties, I believe, will have votes on the funding. And then, of course, there is that technocratic layer underneath the official Board of Peace with the member countries that will be making decisions as well. So if you just go back and look at the first event that we had where we sort of unveiled the structure of the Board of Peace, that structure remains in place, and they'll be overseeing the funds that will be announced tomorrow for their reconstruction and humanitarian
You're surprised about that? Yeah.
Sure.
Another question on that Board of Peace announcement. You mentioned there will be the announcement of who comprises that International Stability Force. How soon will that force be deployed? And have all of the regional partners, all of the regional countries signed off on the makeup of that force?
I don't have a timeline for you today, but again, I'm sure you'll hear more about this tomorrow. So you'll join us at the event. Deanna.
Thanks, Caroline. Two questions.
Sure.
First, the president has talked a lot about housing affordability, and several countries that are facing housing shortages.
And purchasing homes for the American people. And then also, as I mentioned as well, we do see mortgage rates falling. So all of this is combining to make housing more affordable in this country. There's still a lot more to do. The president is still digging his way out of the mess that was created by Joe Biden's administration in jacking up mortgage rates and jacking up housing costs. But we do see very positive trends in this direction. And the president wants the United States to be a nation of owners, not renters. He wants families to live in homes, not institutions and big corporations. Michael.
Ukraine, Caroline. Secondly, on Ukraine,
Sure.
Yesterday Zelensky said in an interview that he says that it's not fair that the president is saying that Ukraine has to make concessions.
Oh, you're talking about Trucker Tim. I see.
And not Russia. Has the president
That's
seen
awesome.
these comments? And when the president says that Ukraine has to make concessions, is he referring to giving up Donbass?
I think the president would respond to that by saying he does not think it's fair that thousands of Ukrainians are losing their lives, and Russians too, in this deadly war. And that's why the president and his team have committed a tremendous amount of time and energy in bringing this war that is very far away from the United States of America, but nevertheless, this is a president of peace. And so he's committed a tremendous amount of time and energy to bringing this war to an end. Just yesterday, there was another round of trilateral talks between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. There was meaningful progress made in both parties. Both sides agreed to update their respective leaders and to continue to work towards a peace deal together. So there will be another round of talks in the future. But I think the president views this entire situation as very unfair, not just for Russians and Ukrainians who have lost their lives, but also for the American people and the American taxpayer who were footing the bill for this war effort before President Trump put a stop to it. And I would just remind everyone around the world that the United States is still selling weapons to NATO that are then being sent to Ukraine in their defense of their freedom in their borders. Michael.
Russia is reportedly joining Iran for joint naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman this week. Has the president issued any kind of warning to Russia or even China not to involve itself if the U.S. decides to strike Iran?
Not to my knowledge, no, or not that I would dictate from this podium. I wouldn't reveal the president's private conversations with world leaders. With respect to that, again, when it comes to Iran, the president has a decision to make, and he will do that, and I'm not going to broadcast what that decision may be ahead of him.
President Barack Obama, Caroline, was recently asked if aliens are real. He says they're real, but he hasn't seen them. The president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, told Miranda Devine of the New York Post that the president has a prepared speech on this issue that he prepares to deliver at the right time. Is that true? And does the Trump administration believe aliens are real?
Well, a speech on aliens would be news to me. That sounds very exciting, though. I'll have to check in with our speech writing team. And that would be of great interest to me personally, and I'm sure all of you in this room, and apparently former President Obama, too. So we'll keep you posted on that. Tyler.
The White House
has touted an unprecedented amount of cooperation with counties in Minneapolis after the negotiations with Tom Homan. Are those written or verbal deals with the sheriff? How many have agreed to cooperate on immigration enforcement who previously refused to do so?
Yeah, the last time I spoke with Mr. Homan, which was just a few days ago, he assured us that nearly every single county in the state of Minnesota has agreed to notify ICE when they are releasing criminal illegal aliens from their jails. This is an unprecedented level of cooperation that we have not seen. It has led to not only cooperation to detain illegal aliens in Minnesota, which just this past week I have looked at the list. They've detained some very heinous people who none of you would want living in your communities, but has also led to a much more calm situation on the ground. We've also seen—
Thanks everybody for coming by. Hit that like, subscribe.
The local police and the state police have now cooperated in the arrests of left-wing agitators and criminals who are unlawfully obstructing immigration enforcement in their efforts. So this is a huge win. And again, the president sent Mr. Homan to Minnesota to do a job, and he has done it well. And I think the situation on the ground proves that.
And are those like written agreements that they've been signed by various officials in the state?
These are agreements that have been made by state and local officials in the federal government, and we are seeing that cooperation play out every single day. These counties are notifying ICE when they are releasing criminal illegals from their jail, and we do know that they are arresting left-wing agitators who are unlawfully impeding law enforcement. There's video to show that. Show it yourself. You can view it with your own eyes. John.
Thank you, Caroline. You mentioned two things: DHS closed and the SAVE Act IDs. Both of these could get solved in 15 minutes if Senate Leader John Thune simply got rid of this phony 60-vote cloture rule and got 51 votes, and that would be the end of it, because everyone in this room knows if the Democrats take over, they'll get rid of that rule in 90 minutes. They already tried it one time, and the two Democratic senators that stopped it are no longer there, Manchin and Sinema. President Trump is backing a lot of these senators for re-election, and yet they will not get rid of the 60-vote cloture rule, which is holding everything up. What is the president's position on John Thune in the Senate finally getting rid of this so this legislation can get moved?
Well, the president has a good relationship with Senate Majority Leader John Thune. They keep in very close contact, and they work together all of the time. I hear your passion in your voice, and I know it's shared by many Americans across the country, including the president himself. He wants to see the SAVE Act voted, and he's expressed that both publicly to all of you, the American people, but also privately in his conversations with Senate Majority Leader Thune and many other members of Congress as well. Yes, Rav, go ahead. Good to see you.
So J.B. Pritzker just recently signed the bill. The law went into effect in January, and it's supposedly going to allocate about $2.5 billion to illegals to go to college and financial aid in the state of Illinois. What is the White House's reaction to this? Illinois is already, by 2027, they're supposed to have a $3 billion deficit. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that. I would say the president certainly thinks that Governor Pritzker is not doing a very good job of managing his state, as evidenced by not only the waste, fraud, and abuse, but also the crime in the city of Chicago that unfortunately Governor Pritzker has refused to pick up the phone and call the White House and ask for help on, which is something his residents want him to do, but he refuses to do for political reasons. As for the specific money, we'll take a look and get you an answer. You're welcome. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Two questions. One is about the president's trip to Georgia tomorrow. If you can provide some additional information about that, why Northwest Georgia was chosen for this particular trip, for instance.
Sure. Well, Georgia is obviously a very important state to the president and to the Republican Party, and the president loves the people of Georgia. He'll be touring, like I said, a steel facility, and then he'll also be stopping by another local business, and he will be giving remarks on affordability, on the economy, on all of the great economic news that I just shared with you earlier. He'll be meeting and greeting with everyday Americans, and that's what the president loves to do, to get out across the country, and he's spoken about his intention to go across the country a lot more, and obviously tomorrow's trip is evidence of that.
Secondly, last week, as you know, big event that took place in the Roosevelt Room, the president announcing that the EPA has repealed these federal limits on emissions for cars, trucks, and power plants. And in the president's presentation, he mentioned that American families will save $2,500 for a new car or truck. Where is the promise coming from automakers that they're going to pass along their savings to those families all across the country?
It's a great question, John. That was an economic analysis that was provided to the president, and I'd be happy to provide that to you so you can take a look yourself. But I'm glad you brought up the president's announcement last week, because this is one of the largest deregulatory actions ever taken in the United States of America. And overall, it's going to save our country $1.3 trillion in regulatory burdens that have really done nothing for our country, nothing for our environment, nothing for our economy. In fact, this announcement received widespread and bipartisan praise. I think I recall seeing the editorial board of the Washington Post, of all places, even commending the president and Administrator Zeldin for this historic action last week. So there's no doubt it is going to save the American consumer money, and I'd be happy to provide that specific economic analysis to you. Sure, in the middle, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Governor Moore in Maryland signed a bill that is ending the law enforcement cooperation with ICE. And by doing that, a lot of local sheriffs are not happy. And in fact, they met today in Annapolis to come up with either a legal action. What is the message of the White House to those sheriffs and to the residents of Maryland?
Well, first of all, it's another despicable action by Governor Wes Moore. Why would you prevent your state and local law enforcement from cooperating with federal law enforcement? If you just ask them, to your point, if you ask a sheriff across the country if they want to have that level of cooperation and coordination with the federal government, of course they do. It makes their jobs easier. It keeps them out of hostile and dangerous environments. It allows them to detain illegal alien criminals who have committed heinous crimes in our country with the most safe circumstances possible. So the president, of course, continues to always stand on the side of law enforcement, and this is another just horrible and frankly political action taken by Governor Wes Moore, and unfortunately the people of his state are going to reap the consequences of it. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. President Trump just said on Truth Social that it would be a big mistake for the UK to hand over control of Chagos Islands to Mauritius. But the State Department earlier this week has said that the U.S. does support that handover. So does this post now suggest that the U.S. does not, or that President Trump has changed his mind on this?
The post should be taken as the policy of the Trump administration. It's coming straight from the horse's mouth. When you see it on Truth Social, you know it's directly from President Trump. That's the beauty of this president and his transparency and relaying this administration's policies to all of you and to the rest of the world. Carrie, go ahead.
There's been a series of walkouts from public school students that have been sort of provoked by a number of public school administrators. What are your thoughts on this? What's the administration's thoughts on this? Will they be taking any actions on these walkouts against ICE?
Look, I think obviously the president and the administration support the First Amendment rights of all American citizens, and if they're peacefully protesting, then that's their constitutional obligation and right and responsibility to do so. Of course, the administration also wants to see American school children in school learning and educating, and I think it does speak to the left-wing bias that is unfortunately very present in our nation's public school system, and it's something that Secretary McMahon has been working very hard to root out of our public school system by ensuring that local governance and local control takes place over our nation's public schools, and that parents and educators closest to students have a greater say over curriculum and academia in our country. Take a couple more. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. The Vatican announced earlier today that they would not be joining the Board of Peace initiatives over concerns that it could potentially compete with the United Nations over handling crisis conflicts. What's the White House's response to that?
Yeah, look, we saw that. I think it's deeply unfortunate. I don't think that peace should be partisan or political or controversial. And of course, the administration wants all those who were invited to join the Board of Peace to join. Because again, the Board of Peace is overseeing the reconstruction of a territory that has been plagued with violence, with bloodshed, with poverty for far too long.
Is he
And this
Sabinik?
president has a very bold and ambitious
How are you
plan
doing
and
today?
vision to rebuild and reconstruct Gaza, which is well underway because of the Board of Peace. This is a legitimate organization where there are tens of member countries from around the world, and we think that's an unfortunate decision. In the back, sure. I'll go to both of you, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead, and then Jake, you can go. You're welcome.
Caroline, can you tell me, is there an update regarding the tariff rebate checks that the White House has promised?
I don't have an update for you on timeline, but I know that it's something that the president and his economic team continue to very seriously discuss.
Thank you, Caroline. I've got two questions. First, does the president see some sort of religious or prophetic component to the unfolding developments in the Middle East?
I haven't spoken to him about that particular perspective, to be honest with you, but of course the president wants peace for all people of all faiths all around the world, and that's part of his push to create peace in the Middle East, which he has done successfully.
And my second question is, as his popularity rises around the world, and especially in regions where he's invested so much effort in promoting peace and ending wars, do you think we might be watching the emergence of a global MAGA movement? Is this something that the president has discussed at all?
Well, I don't know, Jake, but I sure hope so. Take a couple more. Go ahead. Sure.
I wanted to ask you about Iran. As the U.S. military builds up around Iran, is President Trump coordinating war plans with Israel so that if he does decide to strike, that Israel will be a part of those strikes?
Look, I don't have any specifics on the president's recent conversations with Israel. As you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu was just here at the White House last week or the week before. But again, with respect to Iran, there was some progress made yesterday. There are still a lot of details to discuss, and we'll continue to see how this plays out. The United States government, of course, is always in close communication and correspondence with the state of Israel, and that starts right at the top with the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu themselves. One more. Go ahead.
Last week we saw the underlying affidavit for the search warrant that was executed in Fulton County, and there was not any mention in that document about foreign election interference in the 2020 election. I'm wondering if DNI Gabbard has uncovered that in Georgia or in Puerto Rico, where we know her team was sent as well.
I don't have any updates for you on that today. I would defer you to the director's office herself.
Sure. Two questions. One on the president's schedule today. It says he has signing time. What is he signing today? Are we expecting executive orders or actions? That's the first question. And then second, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that a U.S. arms sale package for Taiwan is in limbo. Can you just confirm this reporting / offer any additional comment? And how concerned is the administration that if an arms deal with Taiwan went through, that this could disrupt the China-U.S. Trade truce?
Sure. Well, I haven't read the full Wall Street Journal report. I will just say with respect to an arms sale to Taiwan, I don't have any announcements or updates on that for you today. And to your first question about what the president will be signing, he will be signing an executive order, which you will all be hearing about later this afternoon, and you will see him in 1 hour at the Black History Month reception. We'll see you there. Thank you.
Wow, what a long press briefing. I think regardless of side that you're on or whatever, I don't do that stuff, but regardless of all that, the women that have to come up here and speak and just get grilled over and over again for that long of time, it's just so impressive. These women are super impressive, that just like they're quick, intelligent, just like, you know, they can't get rattled in the questioning at all, which is really cool. It's really cool to see that kind of like personality type like shine in that profession. All right, so we're gonna get ready to take a little bit of a break. I gotta do some packing as we're taking a pretty early flight tomorrow, but I will schedule another stream. Please like and subscribe if you're watching this live and or later, and I'll catch you guys in a bit. Peace. Hope you guys have a good day.